Interior Ashton Library, day. Police Officer Splendid, 35, Mr. Bean in blue jeans, and his fellow officers mill about the library. Officer Splendid prances across the library to the storeroom. A stash of bloody boxes fills the storeroom. Another policeman stands logging everything they find. Ashton Gazette lies open on the checking-in desk. Dissolved to Ashton Allotments. Exterior the allotments, day. Policemen remove the tarpaulins across the rhubarb beds to reveal the missing bodies. The old potting shed door is propped open. Empty shelves stand broken and covered in cobwebs. A bottle of fertilizer sits on a blood-stained workbench. Cut to Super 6 months later. Interior the Denton's house, living room, late afternoon. Benji, Sherlock Bones, golden retriever, the remover of evidence, sits in pride of place in a new dog bed. A man and woman move about the living room. Music from the radio fills the air. A newspaper lays open on the kitchen table. A picture of Pamela Robinson, 46, former playgirl turned care home nurse, Jack Denton, 69, retired, busybody and womanizer, Doreen and Keith Hollingbury, surrounded by police, fills the front page. Fade in. Further down, a picture of Margaret Denton, 59, senior librarian and accidental murderess, stands holding a trophy for Rhubarb Grower of the Year. A letter lies on the floor addressed to the Robinsons. Fade out. Cut to 6 months earlier. Fade in. Interior Ashton Library, day. Margaret busily unpacks boxes of new crime fiction.
I think I'll create one of my masterpiece displays. They'll make everyone sit up and think.
Margaret starts building her masterpiece in books.
There is nothing quite like a good crime novel. It at least takes my mind off Jack and his antics.
Margaret stands talking out loud as she works.
I'm actually dreading when Jack is at home all the time when he's retired from Blackstone and Palmer Savings and Loans. I have a feeling he's going to drive me quite mad.
Margaret pushes the books forcefully every time she thinks about Jack. Bending down, Margaret unpacks another box of books.
Oof, this is so exciting. It's like all my Christmases rolled into one delicious treat.
Margaret takes one of the books and sits thumbing through Unnatural Causes, the newest creation by P.D. James. She sits drinking in each word. Margaret starts to wonder how she can become like a murderer from a P.D. James crime novel. She puts the book back on the display and walks to help one of the regulars. Dissolved to Ashton Library. Exterior Ashton Library, day. The library exterior is shabby, a throwback from the early 70s postmodern stylistic architecture. On the busy high street, people dart in and out of the shop doorways. You can see Margaret through the large window chatting to an elderly visitor. Exterior of the library and the street scene. Interior entrance of Ashton Library, day. Margaret stands, looking around to make sure no one is looking.
Well, the coast seems clear. I'll just move this little hammerhead to somewhere a little safer.
She hides the bloodied hammerhead amongst some filing cards in her desk and closes the drawer.
No one will. One is outdated. Ever know.
Blood drips down below the desk, forming a tiny pool of blood. Margaret kicks a box over it to cover the stain. The last avid reader leaves. Interior Ashton Library storeroom, late afternoon. Margaret is the last to leave the library. She gets rid of more bloody evidence in the storeroom pool. Margaret deposits the hammer and something wrapped in an old silk scarf in an old filing cabinet.
That should sort that out, then.
She pulls the key from her pocket and thrusts it into the lock with a loud clank. Exiting the storeroom, Margaret bangs the door hard and forces it closed behind her.
This door is getting harder every time. Still, that's not a bad thing, I suppose, is it?
Margaret throws the key in her bag and grabs her scarf, wrapping it around her head.
This disguise will hopefully work.
Margaret puts on a dark pair of shades to conceal her appearance. Interior Ashton Library, female toilets, dusk. Margaret stops off at the toilets.
I better wash this blood off before I get home. Otherwise, I'll have Jack questioning me. Why have you got blood on your hands, and why are you so late again, Margaret? Doing his usual poking his nose in again.
Margaret looks at herself in the mirror and leaves the toilets. Interior Ashton Library entrance exit, dusk. She sets the alarm and waits for the automatic door to click behind her. Margaret passes the security guard, 35, bodybuilder, Jobsworth, and waves. Exterior Ashton Library car park, dusk. A beat-up VW Beetle sits parked alone in the darkest corner of the car park. Margaret opens the car door and throws her bag into the back seat and then tosses the carrier bags into the boot. She climbs in and puts on her seatbelt. Margaret applies a fresh coat of lipstick while staring into the vanity mirror, admiring herself. She sits in the car in the darkness of the car park of Ashton Library, wondering how to deal with Jack.
I wonder if Jack has been keeping out of mischief today. I need to think about stopping him in his tracks. I'll just put these bags in the boot.
Margaret has a few surprises in the boot of her old VW Beetle. Checking around her, she drives off at speed. She remembers that tonight Jack would be inviting himself around to the next-door neighbors, and who knows what else. He seemed to have taken a shine to Mrs. Lottie Unwin, 89, widow, cheerful and needy. Mrs. Unwin loves Jack's company. He makes her feel young again.
I better get back before Jack. The randy old goat is at it next door like a rat up a drain pipe. He's taken quite a shine to the elderly Mrs. Unwin.
Looking in the rearview mirror, she checks around her to see who's watching. Interior, the Denton's living room, bay window, early evening. Jack sits staring out of the large bay window in a trance. Benji lays asleep at his feet, having dog dreams and farting. Interior, exterior, Jack looks out, early evening. Jack sits transfixed to the world outside his window. Outside is quiet and devoid of life.
Benji, suppose we'd better be busy before Margaret gets us. Wouldn't want her to think we've been having the time of my day, would I?
Interior, the Denton's living room, early evening. Benji yaps at the shadows passing by the window. Before running to the back door, Benji jumps wildly up towards the door. Jack gets up from his seat. He steadies his gait before strolling towards the kitchen.
Yap, yap, yap. Oi, Benji, stop that yapping. She'll be back soon. Then you can go out and chase the ducks around the pond.
Jack prods Benji to shut him up and throws the squeaky duck toy. Interior, exterior, the Denton's kitchen, early evening. Benji pauses, barking, and settles back down in his dog bed. Jack fills the kettle with water, carelessly splashing the clean work surface. He gets down 2 mugs, scattering coffee and sugar across the worktops.
Benji, I have a feeling that she'll be back any time soon. She's late again. Probably off with her fancy man. Eh, Benji?
Interior, exterior, Margaret arrives home, early evening. Looking in the rearview mirror, she checks around her to see who's watching. Margaret pulls up on the drive. The screech of brakes shatters the quietness. The sound of scraping metal scratches Jack's ears.
Benji, it sounds like she's out. Best be looking like we've been busy today, or she'll be in a lousy mood straight away.
Margaret opens the back door and leans in, breathless and panting.
Jack! Jack! Can you come and help me, please?
Margaret turns and goes back to her car, grabbing the bag's car boot. Jack sits oblivious to Margaret, calling for his help. He sits busily, staring out the window with his binoculars primed, ready to spy on the neighbors. Exterior, Margaret outside the Denton's back door, early evening. Margaret grabs the door handle and forces the door forward, open again. She struggles with the overloaded bags. Interior, entering the Denton's house, early evening. Margaret enters the Denton's living room.
Damn it, Jack. Didn't you hear me calling you? Rampaging zombies could have attacked me. You'd have been out like a shot if it was her next door, no doubt.
Jack stares at Margaret blankly. Benji snores loudly. Margaret stands in the doorway, anger etched on her face.
Sorry, Margaret, love. Benji must have been barking at the time. What did you need help with, love?
Jack piles on the charm and charisma. Margaret pauses before throwing in her bag and turning to exit again. She stands half in and half out of the open door, looking as if she could burst, before returning to the car for a second time.
Where are you going, Margaret?
I'm going to get the bloody shopping in. Where the hell do you think I'm going? What have you been doing all day, Jack?
Margaret looks around the living room, littered with plates and empty coffee cups.
This place looked like bombs hit it.
Jack stands speechless. Benji stirs in his dog bed before going full pelt yapping. Margaret re-enters the living room and bangs the door hard behind her, rattling the glass in the door. Interior, Margaret enters the kitchen, early evening. Margaret enters the kitchen and unpacks the shopping. In a rage, she puts an uncooked chicken in the washing machine, a loaf of bread in the oven, and a bag of sugar in the fridge. Flustered, she tries to regain composure and starts thinking of ways to get rid of Jack. Margaret brews a cup of tea and arranges a plate of Jack's favorite biscuits on top of a little doily. She carries in tea and biscuits on a rusting metal tray.
So, how was it today? Did the O'Dears keep you busy asking for crime novels, were they?
Yes, it was busy this afternoon until closing. However, a few of the regulars seem to be dwindling. There seems to have been a rise in deaths in the area.
Margaret stands silent.
So, why are you late back again, Margaret? Anyone would think you've got someone hidden away in those stupid allotments.
Margaret stares blankly at Jack. She starts to simmer on the brink of rage.
What are you talking about, Jack? Especially with your track record of getting back late most nights when you were working at Blackstone and Palmer Savings and Loan. Who was it then, Jack?
Jack looks gormless at Margaret.
Let me think, Jack. Oh, yes, there was Sharon. Or was it Beryl? And you had the nerve to ask me why I'm back late? One of these days, Jack, I swear.
Margaret stands glaring angrily at Jack, trying not to drop the tray. Interior, Jack sits reading the newspaper. Living room, early evening. Jack shifts uncomfortably in his chair. He moves the newspaper, looking at the latest obituaries. Jack refuses to look at Margaret. Margaret is on the verge of exploding in anger.
Oh, look at that. Next door's got a mention. That is the oldies before this new lot we've got now. Even the gorgeous Mrs. Unwin got a mention. Oh, we'll miss her company. She was such good fun. Oh, and those delicious Victoria sponge cakes. Quite simply the best.
Margaret almost drops the tray as she stumbles forward, before setting down the tray with a thud on the coffee table.
I'll just put this down here. A nice cuppa and some of your favorite bourbon biscuits, Jack.
Jack looks confused at Margaret as he scans the obituaries in the Ashton Gazette again, looking to see if he can spot any other women in his private harem.
Let me have a look, Jack. I wonder if the Trowbridges' names are there. It's funny how they just disappeared, don't you think?
Margaret grabs the newspaper and scans every line of the obituaries. There in black and white are the names of the Trowbridges, looking shifty and uncomfortable. She tries to change the topic of conversation quickly.
Jack, I'm going to take Benji for a walk around the block. I may pay the allotment a quick visit on the way back. See how the rhubarb is getting on.
Have fun. I think I might just pop and check in with the neighbours. Or I may grab a few Zeds. Benji's been desperate to go for a walk all day.
Margaret grabs her coat quickly off the back of the chair. She pulls down Benji's dog lead off the hook on the kitchen wall. Enraged, Margaret fumbles trying to attach Benji to the lead while desperately thinking of ways to get rid of Jack.
Are you okay, love? Is everything all right? You suddenly got a bit red like beetroot. You'll be blended in with the rhubarb at this rate.
Yes, I'm fine. I just need a bit of fresh air. Must be having one of my hot flushes.
Margaret leans forward, patting Jack on his hand before standing back to catch her breath. Benji pulls on the lead, trying to escape. Margaret secures it tightly. Benji starts jumping and yapping again, moving excitedly towards the back door.
Okay, Benji, let's go. No running off too far and no chasing those flipping ducks. Let's leave Jack to his afternoon nap. Although I doubt he'll be napping for too long. He'll be catching up with his fan club as soon as we've gone.
Margaret throws off her coat and pulls on an old baggy jumper before heading out of the back door. Benji trips around her heels, causing her to hop from one foot to another.
Oh, Benji, you silly thing. I know you. Just want to get out and chase those ducks again.
Jack has his head on the table, snoring.
There he goes again, Benji. Snoring his head off, the poor old thing. Let's go, Benji, before he starts moaning and groaning in his sleep.
Margaret and Benji leave the Denton's house through the back door. Benji barks excitedly.